Francisco Chico Buarque de Hollanda, popularly known simply as Chico Buarque, is a Brazilian singer-songwriter, guitarist, composer, dramatist, writer and poet. He is best known for his music, which often includes social, economic and cultural commentary on Brazil and Rio de Janeiro in particular. Son of the academic Sérgio Buarque de Hollanda, Buarque lived in several locations throughout his childhood, though mostly in Rio de Janeiro, São Paulo and Italy. He wrote and studied literature as a child and came to music through the bossa nova compositions of Jobim and João Gilberto. He performed music throughout the 1960s as well as writing a play that was deemed dangerous by the Brazilian military dictatorship of the time. Buarque, along with several of his fellow musicians, was threatened by the government and eventually left Brazil in 1969. He moved to Italy again. However, he came back to Brazil in 1970 and continued to record albums, perform, and write, though much of his material was not allowed by government censors. He released several more albums in the 1980s and published 3 novels in the 1990s and 2000s, all of which were acclaimed critically. Biography. Buarque came from an intellectually privileged family background. His father, Sérgio Buarque de Hollanda, was a well-known historian, sociologist and journalist, and his mother, Maria Amelia Cesario Alvim, was a painter and pianist. He is also brother of the singer Miúcha and politician Ana de Hollanda. As a child, he was impressed by the musical style of bossa nova, specifically the work of Jobim and João Gilberto. He was also interested in writing, composing his first short story at 18 years old and studying European literature, also at a young age. One of his most consuming interests, however, was playing football, beginning at age 4, which he still does today. Born in Rio de Janeiro, Buarque spent much of his childhood there and in São Paulo and Italy. Before becoming a musician, Buarque decided at one point to study architecture at the University of São Paulo, but this choice did not lead to a career in that field, for Buarque often skipped classes. He made his public debut as musician and composer in 1964, rapidly building his reputation at music festivals and television variety shows. When bossa nova rhythm came to light, Narilio recorded 3 of his songs. His eponymous debut album exemplified his future work, with catchy sambas characterized by inventive wordplay and an undercurrent of nostalgic tragedy. Buarque had his first hit with a banda in 1966, written about a marching band, and soon released several more singles. Although playing bossa nova during his career, samba and música popular brasileira would also be widely explored. Despite that, Buarque was criticized by 2 of the leading musicians at the time, Caetano Veloso and Gilberto Gil, as they believed his musical style was overly conservative. However, an existentially themed play that Buarque wrote and composed in 1968, Roda Viva, was frowned upon by the military government and Buarque served a short prison sentence because of it. He left Brazil for Italy for 18 months in 1970, returning to write his first novel in 1972, which was not targeted by censors. At this time his thinly veiled protest single, Apesar de Voce, was also produced, was overlooked by the military censors, becoming an important anthem in the democratic movement. After selling over 100,000 copies, the single was eventually censored and removed from the market. At one point in 1974, the censors banned any song authored by Chico Buarque. Then, he created a pseudonym, naming himself Julinho da Adelaide, complete with life history and interviews to newspapers. Julinho da Adelaide authored songs such as Jorge Maravilha and A Cor de Amor before he was outed in Jornal de Brazil news story. Buarque also wrote a play named Calabar about the Dutch invasion of Brazil in the 17th century, drawing parallels with the military regime. Despite the censorship, songs such as Samba de Orly, A Cor de Amor manifested Buarque's continuing opposition to the military regime. During the 1970s and 1980s, he collaborated with filmmakers, playwrights, and musicians in further protest works against the dictatorship. Buarque approached the 1983 Concert for Peace in Nicaragua as a valid forum to vocalize his strong political views. Throughout the decade, he crafted many of his songs as vehicles to describe the re-democratization of Brazil. The Concert for Peace in Nicaragua was one in a concert series known as the Central American Peace Concerts. These concerts featured various Latin American artists. The political turmoil that plagued this era were expressed in many of Buarque's songs. He later wrote Budapest, a novel that achieved critical national acclaim and won the Prêmio Jabuti, a Brazilian literary award comparable to the Man Booker Prize. Callous. Following the Brazilian military coup of 1964, Buarque wrote about the events which transpired and avoided censorship by using cryptic analogies and wordplay. For example, in the song Callous, a duet written in 1973 with Gilberto Gil and released with Milton Nascimento in 1978, he takes advantage of the homophony between the Portuguese imperative shut your mouth Calche and chalice callous to protest censorship against freedom of speech by the dictatorship, disguised as the gospel narrative of Jesus's Gethsemane prayer to the Father to pass from him the chalice of bloody death probation. The line, "I wanna sniff diesel fume," is a reference to the death of political prisoner Stuart Angel, who had his mouth glued to a Jeep's exhaust pipe during a torture session. Buarque was a friend of his mother Zuzu. Awards and recognitions. 2010 São Paulo Prize for Literature, shortlisted in the Best Book of the Year category for Light Derramado. 2013 Casa de las Américas Prize for Spilt Milk, winner of narrative fiction. Discography. Other works.